Hello everybody and welcome to TJ's Lego Room, and today I am really excited to bring you guys an update for my Tie Bizarro. Not only did I update the pods and the weapons and everything, but I also updated the mechanism, which is a huge deal. Now, if you would like to know how the mechanism works and would like to build this MOC yourself, you're welcome to head over to rebrickable.com, as well as all of my other MOCs that are available up there right now. You can find them there, and let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? Now, I'm going to trick you a little bit because I'm actually going to show you some images that are not of the MOC that we're looking at today, because I've got a little bit of a story here for you. Now, more commonly known as the Tie Bizarro, the Tie Experimental M1 was developed originally for the Imperial Navy in the Legends part of Star Wars. So when Disney took over, they kind of nixed all of the old stuff, you know, the Old Republic and a lot of the books and everything, and called that Legends now. The Bizarro was part of those Legends media. So the original Bizarro was weird for way more than just its looks. Firstly, its looks are weird. But secondly, the ship only had one weapon, a Turbolaser, which is definitely not used on fighter-sized craft for most of the time, but this ship was built for it. The only thing I can imagine that this was used for was more of like a capital ship assault, and not really for a ship-to-ship combat. The third thing that's a little bit weird to me was that the ship had two sets of twin ion engines, one full set on the back of each pod. So while normally this means that the ship would be faster than a regular TIE fighter, the heavy turbo laser and the mechanics with that apparently made it kind of even with other TIE fighters. Just added weight plus double the engines. Now, the fourth thing is that the craft had no pilot. It was actually remote controlled, meaning that it would have to be within the broadcast range of its launch facility in order to effectively operate on the battlefield. However, I will give the designer some credit, as they did keep in mind the Empire's standard military doctrine with the ship. Because while I see it as a detriment to stay close to your home base or capital ship, the Imperial strategy was that fighters were only there to support the larger ships, and they weren't really used for hit and run or remote missions. So having a pilot within the same system, not really a hard thing when you think about how the Empire ran things. And now we come to weird inclusion number 5. It has a hyperdrive. That's right. A ship that needs to stay, I imagine, in the exact same system as its controller or as its operator can leave said system without docking with a larger craft. I personally think it's a little counterintuitive, but apparently the hyperdrive actually can't work by itself and requires a connection to a larger ship to actually work. My guess is that it doesn't have a way to calculate the hyperdrive jumps like Rebel ships usually use astromechs. And Imperial ships usually have built-in computers to do that. But I'm not really 100% sure about why that they would be tactically advantageous, or what having a craft like this can help you with when you're facing the standard rebellion that we see in the Star Wars movies. In an Empire versus Empire battle, though, this could actually give you an advantage over a traditional TIE fighter armament. So you have the one Star Destroyer come in and have to launch its fighters, and then the other one come in with Bizarros that are connected to their hyperdrive system, and they're able to all warp in and immediately begin attacking. So I guess in an Empire v Empire thing, it kind of works. But against Rebels, not so much. Each Rebel fighter had a hyperdrive, so the Bizarros would be taken out rather quickly before they could inflict any real damage. I mean, the first time they tried this tactic, it would probably catch the Rebels by surprise and probably work really well, comparatively. But it's a lot of extra design and production for a one-time trick. So in all reality, it wasn't ever a really pretty ship. It had design issues. It didn't follow the traditional Star Wars design language for TIE fighters. And even for me, the ship did not hold much appeal until I saw this image done by an artist named Rodrigo Galdino. And a link to a site where you can find him easily is down below. Oh my goodness. This is a beautiful redesign of the Bizarro. It's sailing quickly across a familiar Star Wars landscape. I'm sorry. Uh, Being chased like it was stolen, like by some rebel infiltrators or something. They snuck in, stole it, and now they're chasing it down, trying to destroy it before the rebels can get it. I was really intrigued by this amazing redesign, and I immediately said to myself, this should be a Lego. I actually began pretty quickly to build a version of the ship. Once I figured out how to do the outer lines on the wings, the rest of it came pretty quick. So, without further ado, here is my Tie Bizarro. The only thing that I really wish I was able to do off of the original art is that he actually didn't make it gray. He actually made the entire thing chrome, which was so beautiful. Unfortunately, getting Lego pieces chromed is not cheap, so that wasn't really an option. So, I actually call this Tie Bizarro the Tie Experimental M11. So the original was the M1. I imagine that multiple iterations later, including my own iterations, would have landed this as the basically 11th version of the experimental Tie M series. This would be what I think would be close to a final production model for the Tie. And so it would still carry the name the Bizarro for the most part, but this would be kind of the final production version of it. So I'd like to actually address those same 5 points of weirdness as the original and kind of talk about how I overcame those or how I justified the different oddities in the ship. Firstly, the design. The ship is instantly recognizable to anyone who's familiar with the Bizarro, so including you now, since you've now seen images of it. It has a pod on both sides of a vertical wing. Now, obviously, in this case, I'm actually showing it in its landed mode, which is going to be pretty fun, but I'm going to go ahead and throw up an image of it in its vertical mode right now. So, the pod on both sides of the vertical wing, but to make it a little bit beefier, it seems like Mr. Galdino split the wing and threw in some extra machinery into the middle. So instead of just a solid wing, it's split and you've got some extra little doodads and equipment in the middle. And it makes the ship seem a little bit more realistic than what you see with just a single wing just clamped on to a couple of pods. Now, another thing that I would like to show you is the weaponry. Instead of just one turbo laser, I actually went with the more of a fighter-based approach with 2 large, what I considered and what I made up as experimental hybrid laser cannons on the weapons pod. The experimental part has to do with the gas that powers the lasers. In addition to providing the standard destruction, the gas could actually be put through an ionizing filter, allowing the cannons not only to work as a standard laser cannon and destroy stuff, but it also could switch over and disable it using the exact same fuel system, which is pretty cool. Of course, due to the shielding requirements of ion weapons, it actually did require a separate barrel, so that's why you see each one of these has a targeting laser right here, which is the smallest one, and then it has 2 barrels, the shorter one being the ion cannon, the ion barrel, and the larger one being the laser barrel. So, and that's why the emitters look the same, is because it actually uses the same gas, but again, because of the shielding requirements, they had to do that. It's kind of fun. Now, the control pod, or where the pilot sits, wasn't forgotten on this one like during the original Bizarro. This time we have a standard laser cannon, just a regular laser cannon, and a medium laser cannon on there, mounted in parallel. And also just a couple of, I did keep a couple of chin-mounted light cannons to keep that classic TIE fighter feel. These weapons would definitely allow the pilot to be a little less defenseless if the weapons pod malfunctions or becomes damaged and unusable for some reason. Now, another one is the engines. So this time we actually went back to basics. Let me just pull this up forward for you. sorry for the sound for a second. We actually went back to building a single propulsion system in the center of the ship, turning it once again into a standard twin ion engine classification. So the Tie Bizarro had the double twin ion engines. So it was like a quad ion engine instead of a legitimate tie. We went back to the 100% twin ion engine classification. So now in the image from Mr. Galdino, that really awesome one, he didn't show the ship from behind. That the image that I showed you is actually the only one he ever did of it, as far as I can find. But with all that extra machinery in the center, it wasn't really hard to infer that the engines may have been moved to a more centralized position, along with a lot of the sensors and things like that. All right, so oddity number 4 is that there's no pilot. Of course, this is unacceptable, so I actually did build a cockpit for him, and you can kind of see the inside of it here right now. And then, of course, it just needed a way for the guy to be able to get in and out of the ship, which is what we've got here in this little miniature landing zone that we came up with here. All right, now this baby does have a hyperdrive, okay? But instead of being an Empire versus Empire ship, I wanted this one to be on par with some of the Rebellion's classic vehicles. So, and I also wanted to make sure that the large body between the wings had a more legitimate purpose. Since a normal TIE fighter doesn't have a lot of components, I needed to justify why there are so many things going on in the middle of it. And so I thought adding a hyperdrive to that would definitely take up quite a bit of space in the middle. So now, on top of the many changes I've just mentioned, making it different from both the original and the Galdino version, there are a couple of TJ's LEGO Room special editions as well. The first is the rotation mechanism. So let me go ahead. I'm going to pull it off here. We're going to zoom in on me again. This is also so that I know what I'm doing here. So we're going to pull this off here. So we've got this guy in landing mode, like so. And then we're just going to grab the wing and the center pylons and boop. There she goes. Now she's in her vertical flying mode. And then to put it back in, just pop it right down. Now, if you watch, it actually rotates 90 degrees really well. And I've had problems before in the past with whenever I hold one side of something and there's tension between it, the other side will tend to jog or move a little bit when you rotate. But if you watch this, it has very little movement at all. And it really clicks into place. You can watch it. It really does pop right into that 90-degree rotation. I'm super excited about that. So that was the first one. The reason I came up with this rotation mechanism is because I'm always trying to overcome the problem with TIE fighters not being able to land anywhere, or the pilots having to go through a ton of work to be able to get in and out of their ships. So on the Wrath Bomber, there was the sliding cockpit that pushed forward, letting the crew out. On the Javelin, it was even better with the drop-down mechanism that lowered the pilot all the way to ground level. Unfortunately, this one isn't as nice as either of those, but I think I found a pretty good solution. So since the Bizarro is so tall, especially the Galdino version and my version, rotating that center wing helped me lower that profile and help it take a lot less space, like in a hangar bay or in any kind of a ship. Now, interesting as well is because it can rotate like this, the engines end up being pointed straight down, which means that if we went to one of those high gravity planets, like I built the high gravity tank vehicle, tactical vehicle, this is actually a ship that would be able to land on that on a high gravity planet, since it can reorient the engines in a vertical position, which is pretty cool. The second big addition had to do with in-universe lore for the ship. Back in the Legends part of the Star Wars universe, the Bizarro was made with new high-efficiency panels that allowed it to gather power from a single TIE fighter wing. However, The introduction of the large cannon on the weapon side required a significant fuel source to stay out for longer than just a few minutes. I adopted a similar approach, and after some deliberation and a few different rebuilds, I was able to include a power cell in the weapons pod. I kind of imagined that this would end up being used up if the pilot was pushing the craft to its furthest limits and needed the extra power. And of course, it came off in the wrong way. So here we go. There she is. Nice little power cell that goes just into the back here. Woohoo! And that's pretty much it. So there you have it. The Tie Experimental M11 production prototype for the Tie Bizarro. While not the most popular ship ever, it really has worked its way into my heart, as all things Star Wars vehicles seem to do over time. So last time, if you are interested in purchasing the instructions for this sweet ship, the instructions are available on rebrickable.com. If you'd like to hang out and talk MOCs with me, or have input in upcoming videos and what you'd like to see on the channel, you're also welcome to check out the Patreon page, where we do have that fully active Discord now. Finally got it to be able to notify me on my phone, so we're getting better at this technology stuff. As well as doing weekly updates and the occasional bonus video. And on top of that, if you go for the $6 tier or above, I actually give you a discount on the instructions on Rebrickable. So if that sounds interesting to you, I really do try to make sure I give you the value for what you're paying me. So thank you so much for everyone who already is a patron, and anybody else who is considering jumping in there. Please do. We're always excited to have more people. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I know this video was a long one, but I really wanted to tell that story and go over the history of the Tie Bizarro. So thanks for sticking it out with me. And until next time in TJ's Lego room, play well. Bye.